Alright, sports fans, in this video, as the title suggested, we're going to be putting all of this shit into all of this shit. So we'll just go over a little parts list here. I've got my oil filter relocation kit that I had in the old 3VZE. I've got the T4 turbo and turbo blanket. I've got the intercooler. I've got the intercooler piping kit, the charge kit. I've got the electronic boost controller. I've got the wastegate this time around. I didn't have that with 3VZE. And I've got the blow-off valve. So before I go and get started with all this, how much am I looking at here? How much money did all this crap cost? Intercooler, maybe 150 bucks. Intercooler piping kit, 50 to 100 bucks. Blow off valve, another 50 if I remember right. About 80 for the wastegate, depending on how good a quality you go with. 350 for the electronic boost controller. Maybe 50 for the oil filter relocation kit. Turbo was 300, and turbo blanket I think was between 50 and 100 bucks. Now, in order to turn this thing into a turbo, what we're going to have to do is get ourselves some injectors, because the injectors that are in the car are apparently 200cc, and when you pump all that air pressure in there, you're going to need to mix more fuel with it. So I had to get some Subaru injectors, which is why I've got these little injector hats on them. I had to buy all this stuff separately. The pigtail connector, which we're going to hardwire into the car. The 440cc, I believe that's what it was. It's either double or more than double what the Honda can already do. So you're going to have to upgrade your injectors. You're going to have to get pigtail connectors to make them work from the Subaru into the Honda. And then because the Subaru injectors are shorter, that's what the injector heads are for, to make these injectors as long as the stock Honda ones. And depending on where you get them and who you get them from, those could end up being the most expensive thing that you buy, even more than the turbo. I think one guy wanted like 150 bucks for 4 of these, just the injectors, not the pigtails, not the hats, just the injectors. But I was able to get mine for 50 bucks for the set of 4. And then I think these were like 20 to 30 bucks for the 4 pigtail connectors, and then 25 or so for the hats. And there's one more thing that I know that I need. I'm still waiting on it to arrive. It's a little box that's going to sit back here, and it's going to plug into the vacuum source so that I can hook up a whole bunch of this stuff. Because also, apparently, I might have had a couple of things hooked up wrong and not hooked up to proper vacuum sources and blah 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 with the 3VZE turbo setup that I had. But I had enough of it to where I was able to run that truck and end up blowing it up. So hopefully with the guy that I've got to do my tuning, he's done a whole bunch of turbo stuff, so he's going to help me out with that. So anyway, what I'm going to do with this sucker, you've seen guys, they put the spinner rims and the wild paint job and big old fart can in the spoilers and blah blah blah. This is a 4-door daily driver, okay? I want to keep this thing a sleeper. Why? Because nobody else does it. And in case you haven't noticed, I do things that nobody else does. So here we go. So the first thing I'm going to do to kick this project off is get myself a 10mm wrench, and I'm going to take off this hood to make working on this thing easier. And don't forget to disconnect your water feed line for your little squirters for your windshield. If it's been on there for a long time, it might take a little bit of elbow grease to pull it off. Alright, with the hood off, we can continue this. I was speaking with my tuner. Now, he was saying a couple of things. One, the manifold that I had originally purchased, which did not fit my T4 turbo, it only fit a T3 or a T3/T4, my turbo would have come out clear into the radiator. So we were talking about we might have to get rid of the fan, or we might just have to get rid of the radiator altogether and get one of those little half-size ones, which I have seen in other ones, but for some reason in this car it's a full-size radiator going all the way across. So that is strange, considering the last Accord that I had a half radiator. This one also has the air conditioning unit and all this extra piping that's going to be in my way. All that stuff might have to come out. I might not have air conditioning after this, but I'm really hoping that I get to keep all that stuff. Since my manifold did not work, I'm going to have to take off the heat shield, I'm going to have to take off the manifold and see if I can run a little bracket, custom-made bracket coming up somewhere. There's an engine mount right there. So I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna work all this stuff. Try to run my exhaust coming up right here. Maybe have to get rid of one of the fans. Something's gonna happen. Maybe if I got enough room, maybe put an electric fan up front. I need to find some way to hide that intercooler. So this is going to be an interesting project. So as always, I'm not going to upload these videos until it's done and ready and working. It may not last, but I'm not going to upload it until it's actually running and working. I mean, it may or may not take a couple of parts like it did with the truck, but if I do part videos, I will explain to you in the title how many parts there are, and I will upload the videos simultaneously so that you don't have to wait for weeks and weeks and weeks and months like everybody else does. So again, this is the F22A6, as you can see down here. And on this heat shield, we have 3 bolts, 12 millimeters, one here, and one way down there. Alright, now I'll tell you what I want to do with this sucker. I just want to cut, and then 90 degree up into a flange, which will be that flange there, so that it actually mounts to the turbo. Now just put that sucker, like right there. Would that work? No. Sticking up just a little bit. Yeah, and it'd stick up even higher because I'd have to come up and then in, so. Damn. I might have to follow the advice of my tuner, and I might have to get a little half-size radiator so that I have room to put a turbo over here. So sticking with the principle of keeping this thing a sleeper, I don't want to modify the hood. I want to keep this thing flat and down, so the turbo will have to come over here in this area somewhere and down. Also, I'd like to try to use the stock intake box, but that's maybe a 3-inch, and that's a 4-inch, so I don't know, I might have to get some kind of a connector, or I might not be able to use the box at all. Now granted, I would not be having this problem if I went with some cheap little $50 eBay turbo kit from China, you know, but I'm not doing that. I want to use this turbo. I don't want to buy any more crap. I just want to see if I can make do with what I've already bought. That's right, it's build day number 2, because I'm not going to be spending every waking second working on this damn thing like I was with that truck. Plus, it's winter time out here. It snowed last night, and it's raining right now, so I'm not going to be out here all day long. I might spend an hour or 2 on this thing every day, but I'm not going to spend every second on it every day, so I expect this to take a couple of weeks at least. So in order to get the manifold off, I've got 9 of these 12 millimeter little nuts that have to come off. With those bolts off, we got to come down here to these ones, and we'll get to them from the underside. Find the exhaust, and those are going to be 14 millimeter. And unless you're missing some, there should be 3 nuts that go to that. Now before you can take this off, you still have to come down here and loosen up another bolt, which is connecting this back piece of exhaust to the engine block. From the back of the vehicle looking forward, we come back. Here's the oil pan. And those are 14mm on the top and 12mm on the bottom. And I'm going to loosen up the 14mm bolts because I've already loosened them up once before, back when I bought this car. From the front of the car looking back, grab the exhaust and drop it down. Should make this super simple. Alright. Now I'm going to loosen up the front side of my turbo by adjusting these bolts going around it. That way I can move this nozzle where I need it to go. Yeah, it's looking like my tuner was right. I'm going to have to take out this air conditioning cable. So if you're following along with the same build that I'm doing, with the same engine, same setup, you don't have to undo this sucker, which is a 10mm. What you want to do is undo these ones with probably a couple of crescent wrenches and then a 12mm down there. And once you crack that 12mm, you should start hearing Freon. Step back and let it do its thing. Don't breathe that stuff in. Just a couple of crescent wrenches will help with that. So there's a couple of things to consider here. One, wherever I put this damn thing, I mean, I'm gonna have to get a different radiator or something, one of those little half ones. I'd like to put it over here on this side instead of on this side. And then what that would do is that it would allow me to put the turbo over here, and then I'd have plenty of room for the downpipe going down into the exhaust. But I wonder if anybody's ever ran a turbo like this. The exhaust in straight from the block and then straight down out the exhaust. I wonder if I could do that. That would be almost perfect. Does it line up with the hood? Ooh. That'd be such a tight fit trying to get air into it. Well, if we're talking about sacrificing things, getting rid of luxury items, probably air conditioning and super cooled radiator and all this other stuff, I could get rid of my power steering pump, put this right on top of the alternator. Ideally, the best thing to do is to go with one of those tiny turbos, but I got a T4, man. That was the shit that was in the Fast and the Furious, so I don't want to go with a small one. I'm also debating whether or not I want to keep this engine mount. It's a high protrusion, it's just hideous as hell. I don't know why they didn't just flat bar coming up with a twist in it so that it mates up with these two bolts over here. It doesn't look like there's any... Yeah, there might be a little bit of give in there. But I mean, I'd rather have a solid engine mount anyway. So, there's no point in modifying the manifold until I know where I'm going to put the turbo, and I don't know where I'm going to put the turbo until I have room to put the turbo, so I'm going to focus on trying to get a different radiator. And I don't know how long that's going to take, so I'm going to take my welding sleeves, you can take shop rags or whatever as well, and I'm going to stuff them into the exhaust ports. That way, when I finally get this thing all built, I don't have a bunch of crud flying into my turbo. Well, I told you I was working on this thing in wintertime, and it's a damn good thing I put those little plugs in the ports. Well, it's going to be damn near impossible trying to find anything out here. All the numbers on the windshields are all covered up with snow. Well, I think Craigslist or eBay is going to be my best bet. So I finally got my new radiator. It's for a Honda Civic. It's supposed to have 1 1/4 inch inlet outlets, but it's got 1 1/8 inch, but it does come with these little rubber sleeves to help make up for that difference. Looking at my radiator, it looks like the core is twice as thick. So hopefully cooling won't become an issue down the road. Alright, so there were 3 electrical connectors. One I believe was a ground wire that was just hooked on here. I just pulled that off and it's laying down there. It wasn't actually connected to anything on here, it was just holding onto the fan housing. And then you got these 2 electrical plugs, one on each side for the full-size radiator anyway. Once you disconnect those, you got a hose clamp here. I'm going to drain all my coolant so that I don't have to worry about losing it all and having to replace it and jacking up the cost of this build even more. Alright, so when switching to the half-size radiator, I'm going to use the original rubber mounts that are going to go on these little tabs here. And I'm only going to be able to use one side because I don't have one in the center. I've got the little mount down there and I've got the little mount down there. And then if I need to, I can either fabricate a bracket or I can use zip ties or steel hose clamps or something to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. But in the meantime, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take off the passenger side fan and I'm going to put it on there because that is a stock Honda Civic replacement radiator and it should fit that. Well, it's not perfect. Only one of the bolt holes actually lined up. But it'll do. Now I'll take my grinder and I'll cut this little tab here so that I can get that hose on. Well, looks like it's fitting in there pretty good. The only issue is that this top connector is not over here in the corner like it's supposed to be, so I will have to use hose clamps or something to make sure that it stays in place, or fabricate a little bracket to come off of here and go over, or something. But yeah, I should have enough room for that turbo to go in there now. Well, that looks like enough work for today. I think this is how I'm going to mount the turbo. There's really nowhere else to put that intercooler. I think I'm going to have to take out the condenser for the air conditioner. But that'll be for another day. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut both of these flanges off of here. That way I can mount it up to the exhaust down there and to the head. Now, let's see if we can get this air conditioner condenser out of here. It looks like my radiator support actually comes off. These are 10mm bolts, so I can undo those, and then these two, and that one there. A couple of screws, Phillips head screws, so looks like that's all I gotta do to get that out of there. Then I might be able to pull that condenser straight up and out. So, the radiator support and the air conditioning condenser are both gone. It looks like, because the intercooler is going to be just way too big, I'm going to have to cut into the radiator support on each side. So I'll be cutting out this little section here on both sides. So I got ahead of myself and I started cutting out this thing. Apparently, according to the smell anyway of all the leaking fluid, I'm assuming that it is the power steering, I don't know, cooler, I guess? I mean, that's unusual to me. I'm used to working on Toyotas, but I've never seen a power steering cooler, but I'm assuming it's power steering. That's what it smells like to me. But if you do go ahead and make the same mistake that I did, I cut into the rubber hose over here. Now luckily what I can do, since there's two of them, I can take this one that's coming down to here, unhook that one, and I can run it back up to this thing and just bypass the cooler altogether. Why did I cut it, you might ask? Well, I assumed incorrectly that it was part of the air conditioning system, but I guess it's It's either a brake cooler or an oil cooler or I don't think it's oil. Could be a transmission cooler. I don't know, whatever the hell it is. Never seen anything like it before on anything I've ever worked on. I've worked on Chevys, I've worked on Toyotas. I guess Honda must be the only one that does it because I've never seen that before, so I had no reason to assume that it was anything whatever it does actually go to. So that's why I cut it. This thing, it's got me curious now. It's damn peculiar. The fluid that's in it, for some reason it smells like, it doesn't smell like brake fluid, it doesn't smell like clutch fluid, it doesn't smell like transmission fluid. It smells like flame-broiled hamburger meat. So, that is very peculiar. So I'll ask my tuner about it. I mean, it's no big deal. All I gotta do is replace this and then I can put it back in there if I have to. But I'll ask him what the hell that thing goes to. So, I'm going to have to take off the bumper today. In order to do that, you got to come over here inside your front wheel well. You've got two little screws here. Mine were Phillips head screws. Now, interesting fact about the Phillips head screw, it should actually be called the Thompson head screw. Now, the reason for that is because Henry Phillips did not invent the crosshead screw. John Thompson is the inventor of the crosshead screw, who later sold the idea to Henry Phillips, who later had it patented and changed the name of it from the crosshead screw to the Phillips head screw. But of course, John Thompson never got any credit for that. Anyway, little history for you there. But there are 3 bolts, one on the inside here, one there on the inside of this wheel well on the driver's side, one on the passenger side down here. I already took that one off. And then coming in from the front of the vehicle, you have to take off, again, a Phillips head screw. Take off your turn signals, and then you should have 2 down there. So with that out of the way, now I can start cutting into the radiator support. It looks like I've got 2 horns on this sucker. Again, unusual. I've only seen that on Subarus. But now I can take off my air cleaner box. This little additional little thing. Hell if I know exactly what it's for. But it comes down out of the air filter going down. So since I'm going to be running straight from the turbo on over, I don't need it anymore. And I can also see that apparently my car sustained a little bit of a fender bender here. It's got a whole bunch of indentations coming through. I already knew about that, but now I can actually see this, and I already knew that the front bumper had a chip in it, but it looks like the damage was more severe than it appeared to be on the surface. So another good reason to take your car apart so you can actually see what is or is not wrong with it. Case in point, when I take off the horn, I find some broken glass. Alright, so now all I gotta do is replicate that to the other side. But I'm gonna have to do that another day because I snapped my last blade. So today's update is that I finally got the manifold, which only fits a T3/T4 turbo, and I have a T4 turbo, as I've stated. I've got the wastegate mounted up to it, and I've already welded on my T4 flange. Unfortunately, I ran out of welding wire, so now I gotta wait another week or so for some more welding wire to arrive. But I think this is about how I'm gonna have the turbo sitting. I'll allow my air to come in through here and seep through the cracks around the headlight or whatever, so I should get cold air coming in. And then I'll be able to run a 90 coming here. Probably I'll put this silicone sleeve up there, and then I'll just get a 180 degree right here and cut it where I need to so I can go straight into this one. So I think that's how I'm going to do it. I'll run the air going up and over and in, and I'll run my exhaust going down and through here, and I'll run my can't remember what the hell this was called. I'll run this little tube coming over, and I'll weld that into this exhaust tube going down. So today I'm working on this little engine mount here. It had this little circular piece going across here that I've already cut out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hammer it over so that it's over here, and I'm going to weld it onto this plate, and I'm going to cut this section out so that I can have my exhaust coming down and I can have the air coming up and in. So this was the original engine mount. I had to mangle the crap out of it, so now when I put it in there, it'll wrap around like this, and I'll be able to weld it on this side all the way around and over to here. So it will be a strong weld. So there's how it looks now. I'm going to cut off this little top section and this little tab over here, and then I'll weld around on the other side as well. So I'll still be able to have access to those bolts, take it on and off, and it'll still have that little soft mount down there, but it won't have one up here anymore. So, an exhaust update. I've got this tube done now. Now I know it looks like shit, but it does bolt up, it does work, there's no leaks in it, so I don't care about your opinion about it. I know it looks like shit, but it is fully functional. And it lines up. All I gotta do is get a V-band clamp for that. For the V-band clamp, however, a local exhaust shop sells them for about $100, or I can get on Amazon and get one for about 10. Which do you think I'm gonna do? So what I need to do now is drain the oil out of this sucker so that I can drop down the oil pan to run my return line. So we come down here, and that is a 13 millimeter. And once the oil's all drained, I'm going to take off the oil filter and see if I can put on my sandwich plate adapter kit. That'll allow me to run my feed line coming up to the top of the turbo, and my return line's going to be going down into the pan, so I'm going to tap out that hole and weld a little bung on there. The oil filter on the F-22 is on the driver's side, just underneath the intake. You should be able to reach it from the bottom. So, I'm going to be running this return line right there. I'm going to have it come straight down and straight over into the oil pan right there. So I need to mark this thing. I'm going to mark it near the top, that way I don't have to worry about any back pressure from any oil that's already in there. You don't want to put your return line at the bottom of the pan, you want to put it at the top, because if there's any pressure pushing against it, it's not going to want to flow down and back into the oil pan. So now we're under the car looking forward. Here's the oil pan on the driver's side. Straight up from the oil pan, there's your oil filter. So now I've got all these lines out for the oil filter relocation sandwich adapter kit. Hopefully the fact that these lines are really thick won't become too much of an issue. I only need a little bit of the oil to go into the turbo, so that's what the smaller line's going to be for, which is why it has this tiny little hole in it. But the rest of the oil is just going to circulate back around. Yeah, it comes with all these tiny little adapters and everything, and I don't think I have all of them. Hopefully I do have the ones that are required to go into the oil filter spot on the engine. But if I don't, then I'm going to have to run my oil line coming from the spot on the block on the back side underneath the intake where the oil pressure sensor is at. So I got that one on there, and now I gotta thread this one on. Looks like it's actually gonna work. Now, I got these lines that are coming from the oil filter. It's sitting on top of the engine right now. And I've got to connect them. Oh, that's gonna be a bitch. Oh. Alright, now as you saw at the end of that last clip, I had some crap fall off of the side of the engine and right into my eyeball. Now I did have some safety goggles on, my head, but I did not have them on my eyes. So make sure you practice proper safety precautions. You know, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm actually thinking maybe, because I know this line leaks because it was leaking like crap when I did the 3VZE turbo. If I replace this line with a good one, you know, and definitely a lot thinner, then I can just use this sucker. I'll put that on the bottom side of the turbo, and then I'll just leave it set up the way it is. I'll just let my feed line come in like this, let the return line go back. Should be good, right? I mean, I shouldn't have to tap into the oil pan. I shouldn't have to drop that sucker down and all that if I got all this going on. I mean, I assume that is the purpose of this whole thing. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to head on down and get a smaller hose made for that thing, and I'm going to try that, see how that works. If that doesn't work, then obviously I'll tap the oil pan, but that should work. And I also think because these two big lines that are going down to that oil filter, that sandwich kit, that little adapter thing down there on the side of the block where the oil filter was, I think because they're starting to kink, I'm going to disconnect these here and I'm just going to run them down there, and I'm going to have my oil filter down on the bottom. Then the oil pressure should push it up to come all the way up to here, and then it should be gravity feed coming back down into it. Yeah, this thing's actually turning out looking nice. Got my oil line going around, got the heat shield there to protect it from the exhaust. Following both lines coming down. And again, if you're following along doing the same things I am, don't forget to tighten up these bolts all the way around on each side, because I loosened those up so that I could adjust the center piece, the exhaust piece, and the intake piece separately.